California native and world-renowned artist who specializes in paintings and murals. Notable works by Ziegler include a mural on the Cathedral Building in Oakland, California, murals in the Mission District in San Francisco, and a line of Van Stickers. His work can also be found on buildings and offices in places around the world such as Los Angeles, Tokyo, London, and more. It is my pleasure to welcome Zio Ziegler to the stage.
Thank you all for having me. Speaker. As I said, I'm going to find the best way to do these things is to not prepare at all. So I think the image here is a pretty wonderful symbol of that. There's just sort of freedom in not knowing what you're going to do and falling into an improvisation of sorts that sort of makes sense and develops organically. So that, I'll just start with this image. And I'll contextualize this by saying I have not really painted in 2 months. And that's the longest time I've not really made paintings or drawings. Because I became really interested in film. Felt like all my paintings were looking sort of similar. Sort of to slam into each other like a traffic accident. And so I stopped, changed some things, and I became really interested in narrative-based film. So, back to the image. I got off a flight when I did this. This is in Parma, in Italy, and it was a long flight. And I got off, and these people had everything set up, and I sort of am relatively superstitious about saying what I'm going to do before I do it. Then it sort of puts guideposts in that I might want to discard later. So the biggest freedom is exactly like giving a talk like this. I mean, there's no plan. So you can see I'll start at an angle here and move it to there, sort of leg there, move it to there. The whole picture will come in sort of like someone coming back in a conscious state, and things will fragment and start to map themselves out based on what's already taken space and what I'd like to, where I'd like to guide it in the future. So I'd say the thesis of the work itself will emerge after this process will take place. And the whole wall, which you'll see a photo of later, took about 2.5 days, and this was, I think, 4 hours to 3 hours maybe. So just to give you an idea that I don't get back from the wall, I don't get back from the canvas. I sort of just look at things and start following lines or following movements in a very nose to the wall sort of way, in the same way that I will at the top, in order to find substance or meaning later on and then bring it all together. So that's the hope. I will run through some images for you here. I've been painting for about 10 years, I guess. Yeah, there you go. I was a very reticent painter, so I did not want to do this by any means. I simply just found myself obsessed with it and really drawn to it, compelled to like continuously make works. I wanted to design sneakers and t-shirts and things like that. So all of a sudden painting sort of took my part, and I was drawn to it time and time again until all of a sudden it swallowed everything I wanted to do. Which is, I make it sound bad, but it's actually, when art and life are close like that and very proximate, you start to confuse both sometimes. And so you need to create events in your life that make good work, or vice versa, or events in paintings that make things good in life. So I'll run through some images. This is an old mural. I used to have a few friends that painted as well, and we figured, what's the best way to get your work out there right out of school? So we would wander the city and look for construction walls, sort of a legal open ground, I guess. And we'd go on Sundays and we'd roll them white, and then we'd paint them with black spray paint or whatever we had in our backpacks in broad daylight. And all of a sudden, what was considered at night vandalism, in the daytime was considered public art. And I thought that was a very interesting paradigm. So all of a sudden, I was lucky enough to find that little window in time and make it work in that way. But I was never really interested in being a muralist. And like painting, sort of took the thread and took the dominant role for a few years. And I find that I've always worked better in the studio, but there is a pace and a dynamism to working to working limited materials in the public sphere as fast as we can. So I'd say the same thing is now relative. I'm looking at this all through a lens, no pun intended, of film now, and now I'm looking at the same thing from that perspective. So I'm always a step ahead of what I'm making, and that's the best way to put it. So I'm really interested in the pictograph, in the way that language is changing. I'm a big fan, as you can tell, of Aboriginal and ancient artifacts and cultures that use art as a method for communication rather than art as a sort of reductive dialogue. Really interested in work that can survive without a context. So the best thing for me is to go to a museum and look at an artifact or an icon that could be totally misappropriated to any culture and still say something about the communication. So that's where I sort of stop in my tracks and go, wow, this is something that I'm very enamored with. Things that can survive translation, time. So you'll see me trying to emulate that raw, I called it a tabula rasa-esque figure for a long time, that raw human form, the one that I can tell any sort of story with. So this is it reduced all the way to that form. I listen to audiobooks while I paint. I used to, now I listen to podcasts a lot. So I will try to distract my conscious mind as much as possible in order to, it might be tangential to what I'm working on, but the real core idea is that I take the mind, the critical mind, the conscious mind that like will make me doubt myself tremendously, and I fixate that on something that is really hard for me to understand. And so while that churns in the background, my hand and my, well, I'm sure there's some neuroscientists or something like that in the room, but you could probably describe it better. It frees a part of me to be fluid in that way. So you'll see works like this that I don't necessarily understand while I'm painting them. And then as they come to life, it not only represents a symbol or transition in my personal life, but it will represent probably the text that I'm reading, and it becomes a whole, like, it turns out that I've subconsciously been attracted to the book that I want to read because I want to understand that subject, because I want to paint that subject in order to make it relevant to my own life. A lot of words. But this, in many ways, is about what makes us and what we make, I guess. And I was reading The Hunchback of Notre Dame at the time, and so there's chapter 5 about the printing press destroying humanity, which has been a really interesting theme. So I made this, and subconsciously I did not know that all the things connected, and somehow I was always interested in what I would, sort of factors that made me, the context that made me, that shaped my mind in order to make my judgments about what I value in the world and what I like, and then how that translates its way into work. So I'll keep going slide-wise. I tend to ramble. Just a bit of scale. I tend to work relatively quickly because, well, things, they can get sort of tedious after a while when you're executing. The best part is to lay out the map of what you're going to do. The rest of it is just filling in. So you can see this is many years ago. It was a lot of murals. It was going to cities for one day or going to places for 5 hours and doing something. Trying to tell very, very broad human narratives. I mean, this for me was, I'm sure if I asked you all, you have, I'd be interested to see where the responses were grouped in terms of the significance of that picture. But, you know, it sort of went through all this black and white style, added some color. You know, some took a week, like this one. This was like a cycle of civilization. And some I collaborated with friends. And so this is in my hometown. So all of a sudden, this became a process that I was tremendously enchanted with for a couple of years. But the studio work, which I can go to now, there's a lot of materials there as well. We'll go to the early paintings. The studio work was always the core focus, and that's where things were developed. I felt less wide-reaching outside. I would always develop the motif inside, and then it was selective improvisation when I got to the outside. So you can see this is one of the earliest paintings I made. That was in my studio at school, which was like 7 by 7 feet. So of course the paintings were like 7 by 10 feet, and then we had to hoist them out the window. This is the style, I mean that's the Laocoon, if you recognize the thing that was pulled out of the sea. So I used to take ancient motifs, this is sort of another theme, and I would revisit them in a contemporary way. So this is the sculpture that lacked attribution, I guess, to the artist, and it allegedly started the Renaissance in terms of it was like classical form in a new way. And so this, I mean, there's a great story behind the Laocoon if you look later. So I was interested in taking those forms and revisiting them in pattern, because I think that the pattern began to symbolize this very, very fractal culture we have in a way, this melting pot that is our personal lives and our public lives. So I think I was also quite bad at painting flesh. So the pattern became a device, and something we can explore through the talk or your questions is when I'm really bad at doing something, I try to find something that I'm not so terrible at, and through that crutch, you actually sort of find something that's unique sometimes. And it sounds like a cop-out, but the best experiences I've had where I gave up trying and I sort of embraced natively how something functioned for me. So this is a very, I look back at these paintings and I cringe. This is my first big figure painting in a way. I think that thing is about 8 feet tall. I work habitually in my life. I eat the same foods. I paint the same things. I like the same themes and the same books. So I now paint at 8 by 6 feet for about 5 years, and it's very hard for me to paint any other scale. Sometimes 7 by 10, 8 by 6, but I'm a creature of habit. So in essence, I really became interested in how to twist the form around, how to make it elastic, and how to make the form evocative of more of larger narratives and things like that. So a lot of these paintings you'll see, these are like 2010, 2011. Then I sort of started to tinker with black and white. This is on plywood, so I would find wood or materials that would dictate the size. Then there's these next iterations of black and white works. I'm going to not talk directly about the work, but flip through it as I talk. That might be more effective. Pretty much as soon as I find a moment that's comfortable in painting, like I said, it happened about 2 months ago, I started to know what I was making, and it became very conscious. That's the best opportunity to sort of rip the rug out from beneath yourself. At least that's been my thesis, and then start all the way from something fresh and new and very vulnerable and dangerous. So I look at like my painting as not, the word has multiple significances, but like a trend, like an economic trend in a way. It's not an economic trend per se. It functions in a way that moves up, and in like a wave will go back down and then move up again. So when I reach the zenith of what I think is the creative capacity and style, because I'll work in multiple styles simultaneously, that will be too far and too vulnerable and too scary to maintain for too long, like the peak of any market, right? So I'm not an economist either, but then I will retreat into something familiar, with which I will move forward back to the same terrain with more momentum, take it a few points higher, and then I will retreat again. And so I sort of look at the creative process, and I talk to friends of mine that share this similar journey. We all seem to work in these ebbs and flows that get progressively more experimental until I'm sure there's some meta ebb and flow that I don't even want to think about right now. But so you look at like these paintings too. These started, working. There's all these different styles that sort of manifested themselves because of this ebb and flow trajectory, this trend-oriented trajectory. And are you guys? Is this relatively coherent? I'm just curious. Okay. Okay. So styles like this, I consider my romantic style. This is the full-blown aesthetic manifestation of everything that now I sort of despise about myself, right? This is everything. Maximalism. This style came about as a product of being in school, not knowing what my work was about, putting my paintings in front of people to have them say, all project their own significance into the work. Then I started to realize that this might be a strength, it was a weakness. I didn't know what the paintings were about. So I started to put more motifs in there and more symbols to the point where the dialogue became what people were saying about the work, not what the work was standing for in and of itself. Now, as the work progressed and that trend progressed, I started to find different significance in the paintings themselves. I started to revisit these like Byzantine era, very like when painting sort of went from semi 2D to 3D in a way in terms of its representation, like the classical form entered. I went back to that period, and in many ways, I started to revisit a lot of these issues. There I am. I started to revisit a lot of these issues, like St. George and the Dragon, and I started to find contemporary context for those issues, a parallel in something that was happening in culture, and I started to use that through the device of an old narrative tool to talk about things that are going on. So, you look at things like this, which I look at as a complete failure, and I want to put it in here because this was the top of a trend, in a way. I once had a guy come to my studio recently. He said, "Good artists are not made by not having any discretion about their work. Good artists know their worst paintings," and I think that's more interesting to me now. It's sort of sadistic, but I definitely know my worst work, and I can look at my worst work in a way, and I'd like to tell you why this painting is so terrible. Simply because I knew what I was doing. If you looked at the previous slides, right? I'd experimented, I had gone, I created depth, and then all of a sudden I tried to take all that away and push it a little bit too far, too fast. It was a step too far. And it also became so, it became so conscious. The trend became so conscious in my own work that I sort of got tripped up on my own devices. So that's why the painting fails for me. It might not be an aesthetic conclusion that sucks for you guys, but when I really reach a point where I know what I'm doing in work, it's all dead, and I want to start with something very unfamiliar. So we'll work through these. Another very, and there might be 10% progress in a work sometimes, or 5% progress, and I'll extract that bit that works and try to make a series of canvases about that. So once again, we're talking about general human themes. We're talking about, I like this work a lot. We're talking about things that I'm reading about and exploring. Recently, it's been quite a bit about consciousness, both AI and consciousness, so there's been a lot of things focusing there. This, once again, life always brings about, we have 5 minutes left of my ramble. I'll blast through these quickly. It's all the form. This was a significant painting for me because it sort of represents everything that I'm talking about right now. I called that one the studio and system. The outside world, the studio. Once again, I'm sure you guys know the story. You know the story of the chameleon in Galatea, a sculptor that falls in love with his own work, and then she comes alive, and so on and so forth. So, in many ways, I'll take things that are going on in my own work, bring it into the canvas to understand it, and then work from there to create a body of work exploring a very, very small subject. That's an east versus west, not like the United States thing, but like, So you're seeing now things sort of loosen up. It took me many years to sort of give up on the control of my own hand. So things were tightly controlled, and I didn't think they could be significant unless they were really aesthetically overloaded. And then it got to this point where all of a sudden stuff just started to break loose out of frustration. And then you got into these paintings. And I'll take you all the way up to where we are now. The gesture became a big theme. That painting is called Who I Am, and that's the wrong title, but I change the titles frequently, so, as an artist is supposed to. So, this was called Who I Am and Who I Want to Be. It was the last, it was about 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, when I sort of stopped painting and revisited things. And I came back with this gesture, which may not be significant to you all. For me, it was this idea that I despised where these paintings were going. This figure underneath, I knew what it was going to turn out like. So I had to rationalize that conventionality with a gigantic risk at the end that could ruin it all. This on top is an oil stick. It does not come off. So you have 30 seconds to destroy everything you've worked on for 2 weeks. The same way that I have the last 5 minutes of this ramble going to sing. So you'll see, this is my studio 2 years ago. And you've seen since 2011, right, where everything's frenetically detailed and controlled, and I'm not listening to criticism. And then we're getting here, and the most interesting painting here is this for me. because it does everything these other works do, but in a way that has more confidence, and it's actually, in a way, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was the easiest simultaneously. It's the same thing about that, developing that visual language I was saying earlier. So we all of a sudden get to this point now, about a year ago, where all the paintings are loose figures. Some of them are tight, some of them are experimental, and then I started to get into sculpture as a total mistake. Once again, you're seeing the theme. So the sculptures became, do you remember you can say yes if you want to. Do you remember the white gesture I just showed you on top of the painting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the white gesture looks awfully familiar to that form, doesn't it? So all of a sudden it became a three-dimensionalized gesture, and it overlaid the rest of my work and my life to this degree. So sculpture became the gesture of who I am and who I want to be, as the white gesture was to the canvas work previously. Sensible? Okay, so we got to these busts. These things look like gestures. Then we have these this is the last of the very tight paintings. Because, like I said, there's the black and white work, there's the figurative work, there's the murals, there's all this stuff. They all populate simultaneously, and they all build to a crescendo, and then I freak out and go back down here, and it goes builds to a higher crescendo, and then and I'll make a significant work every once in a while for myself. And this was like the last of the tight paintings. So when what's his name got elected, I made a painting about the country changing in this style. And I can't finish it. It just sits in my hallway. And that's the last thing. I mean, it was very much, it would have been a really interesting work for me, but the style had died. So please feel free, if you see me in 2 or 3 years and I'm making stuff like this, just to slap me, because this would be the total collapse of everything I believe in, to go back to something that's this comfortable. So, blah, 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 triple self-portrait. Once again, you have these sort of literary themes and stuff like that. This was I love referencing other paintings, so you have a wounded man, the corbeille at the bottom, and things like that will take 10 years to metastasize into something that populates a work. You have a latent gesture, like one of the last gestures. Once again, slap me if I make another gesture. Now you have these busts, which I was reading a lot about the origins, prehistory, and talk about that later in questions. But these things are misattributed. So these busts became an interesting theme, and I'm going to get to the end, I swear. Now, sculpture, which probably won't have time to address maybe in questions. Sculpture became a theme for the last year. Another style. And that's sort of where I am now. And then it went to minimalism and abstract painting, which, like I said, that was like the top freak out. I went this far. I took the figure out entirely. And, we'll talk about that later. And I think that's one of the most raw experimental works I've ever made. And it's a perfect summary of the last 10 years of trying something. And it also brought me to the point of trying to walk away from painting, which I'm not going to do. But it was so far. It's so experimental. It's so different that I sort of lost my bearings, as artists do. And now I've gone through all my different styles in the last couple months trying to put the pieces back together. And now, yesterday, I started painting. So, that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler, for joining us at the Berkeley Forum. To start out, you describe how important your studio is to you and how you describe your creative process as a primordial simple possibility. So what exactly is your process for finding the art within the absolute chaos? And what indicates to you that you found something for the project?
That's a great question. You're opening very strong. I was just in France last week, and it was this opportunity I was really excited about, and this foundation. And I walked into the studio that all these artists had been in, Muralist signed the printing press there. Okay? and I had a panic attack. There was like Giacometti's, Chagall's, that was all there, and there's this artist that I admire. And all of a sudden I had to reevaluate sort of everything, being that close to things that I admire that much. I mean, not the same, obviously, but I got to the space and this primordial soup of chaos that works in my studio, where I know where the White House paint is and I know where the thing is, I'm able to be mindless. It was the first time I tried to work in a different studio in someone else's space, and it just totally did not work. And I hate to disappoint you all as I did them, but I got to the canvas and I was like, this, I can't do this. Like I need to have it in the comfort and the rhythm of everything I know in order to experiment a little bit and work. I made some drawings and stuff like that, but the immediacy of a mural when you go there, you have this internal monologue with yourself, and that's all the factors, the chaotic factors, with the podcast, the books, the relationships, life, whatever. Everything channels into 3 days, whereas you enter a studio and you have the canvas, there's something very superstitious when you got working in a space like that. So it didn't work. So I don't know what the alchemy of the studio is. I simply know that it's having a process around the studio that makes my life feel like it's stable, to the point where I can take risks in a controlled environment and iterate to the degree of that day, or see how far I can come.
Look at those differences working in the studio versus creating murals. Murals are permanently set in locations, and oftentimes are influenced by the surroundings of the places where you choose to paint those murals. So how do those kinds of factors affect your stylistic decisions?
I think you're more obligated externally, like in the public sphere, to address things that are localized, and sort of have to get out of your own way and talk about what's happening in that environment. And so I think the most interesting muralists, I can't talk about my own work in this way really, because when I go to a place and I make a work of art like that, I'm trying to go ahead and not talk about news top 10s. I'm trying to delve into the history of a place, and the zeitgeist of a place, and find an allegory, a historic allegory or a proxy for that, grab onto that proxy, and then change something very subtle about the narrative. Like I've been really listening to, I don't know the name, but Parsifal, the opera, recently quite a bit. Now, I don't know why, but maybe it's because I'm on a grail hunt of my own work right now in terms of a new thing. And I think that's sort of like, if I were to go to paint a wall in Paris, I would feel obligated to use, I don't know, Balzac as like, as the staple, or use the Balzac narrative, or a narrative arc that he has, and use that as the foundation of an allegory there to talk about the public sphere. In the studio, I feel like I can talk. I don't have to decide what I'm going to say before I say it. Really interesting progress happening in some of these sectors, or so I read about, right? I mean, space is a frontier, clean energy is a frontier, especially some of the philanthropy that's taking place, some of the resources that these companies do have in to bring art to public spaces or design interesting buildings again. Because I think architecture went through tremendous decline. With this, and you walk around a city like Paris. I was lucky enough to be in Paris last week. Last week. And you walk in, that's like austerity. I mean, everything is dripping with this sort of not just an antiquity, but a pride and a craftsmanship. And I think it would be my hope that companies, or whoever it might be, would supply our urban landscapes or our creative communities with enough resources to create craft as an important factor in our own community.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler, for answering my questions. We're now going to open it up to the audience for questions. If you have a question to ask Mr. Ziegler, please raise your hand nice and high, and please keep your, please project, because this is a small. Yeah.
So you started off in art school, being an artist, and it seems like you're really attracted to this idea of the intuitive nature of ignorance and how you try to kind of close off all these other avenues and you don't like being on the street and people having you. And do you think that you just naturally progress towards film because it gives you more control over your creative environment and your medium? Like,
I love your question, and I hope it's true. I frankly don't know. I mean, I want to know. I'm really curious. I traded a painting for a camera recently, and I hope it was a good painting, so I hope this works out. But I don't care if I ever really show my film that I make to anybody. I'm interested in the challenges of understanding what aperture can do, or light balance. You know, like it's a whole new skill set that I know nothing about. The same way that all of a sudden, over 10 years of painting, you can sort of distinguish like a sable brush from like a watercolor brush, and the effects that will have, in like a medium versus different medium. Like you just become sort of semi-fluent in the materiality of things. And I think with film, I still have no idea. So I'm making those very fun, new mistakes that only a beginner can make. And I think, you know, there's such freedom in being a novice, you know, and that's what I'm attracted to. But I'm not going to stop painting. Like, I think it's actually going to make the painting more interesting because I'm starting to think about the way I paint through a lens now, and by using factors that I have. So I don't know how that's going to change it, but I think it will. So we'll see.
Just one more thing, like, were you inspired by David Lynch?
He went to painting, right? Or did he go painting film?
He started off.
So I read the David Foster Wallace essay on David Lynch, which I enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, I'm really influenced by like Jim Jarmusch and stuff like that, right? These guys that they really challenge the medium. That's what I don't know. You find out that a lot of people obviously are very multifaceted, and only one aspect of their creative process gets the spotlight sometimes, if at all. And I think that's interesting, and it doesn't surprise me that, you know, that sometimes you find out, wow, this guy is like an incredible musician and a playwright and a painter, and you need all of that in order to feed it all into one practice that gets a little bit more attention, right? So I think you just sort of open new doors. Oh, it's there, you know. Maybe it's like animation next. And my friend, this artist named Smith, who lives in Mexico City, he's working on an animation for Jodorowsky. And he knows nothing about animation. And he's like, yeah, I mean, we just did it in Photoshop. And it took us 6 months in Photoshop, creating frame after frame after frame, until some guy was like, no, this is much easier to do it this way. But I think it's very unique the way that he did it in Photoshop. And I saw it and was like, this is unbelievable. And he's a painter and sculptor and a designer. So I always like meeting people like that who can open new doors and do things the wrong way and learn something more about it because they did it so incorrectly.
What prompted the exploration of the consciousness?
So my dad is sort of a Taoist, I guess, like interested in Taoism. So it's always been like a theme. Most recently, I listened to Sam Parrott's podcast quite a bit. It's tremendously interesting. And I saw this guy, who was it? I can't remember. I'm reading a book called I'm a Strange Loop right now, about the mind. I think things just work in themes. I was going from reading, actually I read this, I went on a science fiction binge earlier this year, or a speculative fiction as they call it, the three-body problem. The three-body problem became an interesting consciousness. I will look at my, after and find you the name of this guy who explores quantum consciousness in a way, and that led to something else, which led to something else, which led to something else. But I think it's always been a big theme, and especially around, maybe it's no longer perfect, like narrow AI or wide AI. This is like a pressing force in our society. I think that sort of spun off an interest train. It's the same way that works in painting or in any creative process. It's like a very small factor or crumb that will lead you somewhere entirely different. I think the best thing is, like, I read Herodotus because someone in the English page was reading Herodotus. Oh, okay, what's the guy reading? You know, I'm going to read Herodotus now. It's the totally wrong way to read Muralist. But we find things when we're ready. I find things when I'm ready to find them in the places that I least expect. Like one of my favorite books of all time, White Noise by Don DeLillo. And that first wall I showed you, I had no audiobooks on my phone. And this is the one that I had, and I could not make it past the first couple chapters. Like, by all means. And finally, I had nothing, and like, no cell service, nothing. So I listened to White Noise, and all of a sudden, wow, DeLillo, it's hard, obviously. And that led me down into the path. So it's very much, it's just sort of faded. And I think the next exploration is pretty well.
Well, yeah, I'll talk to Sam Harris. What are your thoughts on, I don't want to take all the question time, but I know he argues that we don't at all. So is your art taking you, or are you guiding it? I don't want to, yeah.
No. I sort of, my personal thesis, not that it matters, I'm not a neurologist, is that decisions seem to be increasingly, it's like there's this, like the Bayesian reasoning thing that he's talking about a lot recently. Okay, so free will is weighted in a way. It's like you could almost map out based on giving someone's early experience heavier probabilities. You could map out the likelihood that someone will do certain things based on certain, almost a decision tree or a logic tree of what they find comfortable, or this is a way of perception. But yeah, I think to some degree, perhaps there's a probability mark in what we consider.
We've got time for 3 more questions. Okay. I'm wondering, rewinding a little and thinking about kind of the first yes you were given to create and go for what you're creating, and then kind of like you got that yes, and then you're in this kind of like, I can create, but there's some restrictions and kind of like the mindfulness of when you first got that okay to kind of just like, I'm going to create big, and I don't have the space, but I'm just going to do it, and then I'll send it out.
I love that. It's a great thing to talk about too, because when I listen to these talks, and I probably did this the wrong way, I listened to a lot of artist lectures, or I did for a lot of years, and I want to understand how it went from school through the first couple of years to like how things got to like exhibitions.
Yeah.
So let me try to answer this as fast as I can, because whatever. So my big overarching thing is make the most of every single opportunity. When you are provided with 0 opportunities in any field, like whatever is in front of you, go ahead and don't be frightened of your own ignorance. Sort of use it to your advantage. But everything you have, do things for free, and then it become like invaluable to the people who are doing things for free, and then start to charge them potentially money for what you did for free. And they never liked that. But my first big painting, I don't think it was in there, was in a pizza place in Mill Valley. I was working in a surf shop doing weird branding and everything. And and I had this opportunity to paint a mural in a pizza place. And it was like for it was for like materials plus a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And I spent.
You just used to go into the pizza there?
No, they were building it.
Oh, they're building it.
And it's about the size of that chalkboard. I'll show you later.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity for people to see the work. So I painted this thing. I spent day in and day out, a month. I had the flu. I was like, this is going to be the best painting I've ever made. And maybe someone out of nowhere will come in there and say, that's a good painting. I like that guy. So I made this whole thing. I'm almost done with it. And she's told me by this point that she doesn't like the painting and she doesn't want the painting. And I'm not going to get paid. She says, I'm going to change the whole place, so feel free to do whatever you want to do to the place. So I had a can of black spray paint, and I'm not like a spray painter. So I started to draw on the wall with spray paint. Enter first black and white figure. A dude in like a car makes a 180, comes up to the door, knocks on the door. Yo! I was like, hey, what's going on? Like I'm bummed out. And he walks in and he says, I love this. And I think he's talking about the work that I've spent a month on. And instead, no, he's talking about the black and white thing that I just made in 5 minutes. That was really easy. So come to my house tomorrow and make one of those. And I said, what? Oh, yeah, sure. I don't want to ruin your wall, man. Like, no way. So I go to the guy's house. I paint the thing on his wall, and I'm like, oh my God, there's paint on the floor. Like, I'm so sorry. I don't know if it's a good one. black and white. Never known, this is my second one. And from there, someone who worked in a gallery came, and I did it for free, of course. And someone from a gallery came in Los Angeles, and to his house once for dinner, saw the thing on the wall. So that's interesting. And I see that at our studio, came to my studio, saw the work. I was in a group show there. Enter first big upside down figure painting. I said, I'm going to make the most of the show. I'm going to make 30 paintings. They want 5. I'm going to make the best 30 paintings I can. And then that painting sold, and I was like, oh my God, someone bought a painting? Because it's not like, you don't think this is going to happen. It doesn't happen. It just, if they ask you to make 1, make 45. And don't sleep, and don't think about anything else, and obsess over it because you need it. And so I've had artists go to the studio, and I'm trying to figure this stuff out too. Like really, you ask me about insecurity or doubt or all these things. This is more relevant than you could ever imagine. But, and I am not figured out. The one thing I have figured out is that if you need it, if you need it, you will make it happen. It's not like a secret or whatever, but like, it's screw that. This is just a matter of like human willpower.
Yeah.
And it will always be the thing that comes most easily to you, in my opinion, that is the most significant work that you make. But you will try so hard to do something else to impress people that will take time away from what is most obvious. It's like the Occam's razor, okay? Go with what's easy and simple, that is the best way. Helpful?
I'm curious to know what motivates, inspires, and informs your work. You mentioned tonight that your art is muralist and improvisational. So the question that I have is, when you set out to create a piece of art, do you have, like, is it a feeling or an intuition that you're following, or do you have a specific message that you're trying to convey?
It's both. It's often the state. I think the mode that my conceptual work is made in is improvisational, but my improvisation or my instinct leads to backing into a concept that I'm already exploring in other more theoretical ways. So my life is that of I'm constantly researching the things I'm interested in. Most artists that I've talked to start with a concept and work into the painting. I start with action and painting and work into the thing that I'm already exploring as a concept and filter my instinct through that vehicle or that research, and what will come out the other side is actually a device or an augury in a sort of way in order to foretell things that will happen in my life or that I'm interested in. So it's that filtration process of instinct through fact that makes a work. So it is conceptual. And I've tried starting from another place of setting certain restrictions in my work. And trying to participate in the discourse of painting, which now I'm not really that interested in. Because I think if you read this book called The Painted Word by Tom Wolfe, he sort of delivers in many ways the final blows to working conceptual. I'm not against it. I think the conceptual vehicle is a very interesting one. I just think the second that you are more and more reductive in your logic and in what is possible, you enter these different faster and faster periods of painting, like what's now being called zombie formalism or something like that. Or the next thing, now this is pseudo-naive painting, right? We're entering these faster and faster iterations and trends. I'm saying, let's scrap that. Let's talk about bigger themes, concepts that you're interested in that may not participate in what's going on in the museum circuit. It could be consciousness. And let's make work driven by instinct that talks about consciousness, where you really are discovering your thesis on the other side of the painting itself, because it takes the painting to discover what you're trying to say about consciousness, for me.
This is going to be the last audience question.
How would you define artistic success? Like in your personal opinion,
For my success is a strange one, I think. There's a great, if you've read Infinite Jest, and I don't mean to be like the guy who says you've read Infinite Jest, but I'll tell you this much. There's that scene, you've read it, yeah? Lyle, if you have a chance, just go check it out. So Lyle is this dude, and I think he's a wonderful character. He's like a monk or something like that sits in the basement of a tennis academy, and this one kid's very concerned with success, and the kid comes down there and says, oh, I want to be like the best tennis player in the world. And Lyle says, don't worry about being the best, worry about what happens when you think you're the best, and when you stop receiving as much adoration around the work as you wanted. And this is beautiful, I can't botch that. For me, so for a long time, yeah, it was about being competitive with my painting. Very much like a sport for a while. How, I want to make paintings, I want to make paintings, I want to make murals, I want to travel all the time, I want to do this. Now I'd say, yeah, that was a nice period. Success would just be able to have the opportunity to continue doing stuff that I know nothing about. And really, every time I got comfortable with something, have the modicum of confidence or instinct to sort of move into something I was even less familiar with. And I walked around the Picasso Museum. If you ever have a chance to go to Paris, go to the Picasso Museum and look at a year of that guy's life. A year. It's like boom, 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 style, boom, this, that, boom. Whoa. So you look at the paintings, slow down. I mean, I read the biography, fascinated with some painters. I'd say, in many ways, that looks a lot, not like the life of him, not what the paintings sell for, but the fact that that guy can smash a style, go to the next style, smash a style, go to the next style, iterate. That iteration